Evelyn Hart found out she had been replaced in the most ordinary way possible. Not through a confession, not through a dramatic argument, but through a family group chat she hadn't spoken in for weeks. The message was a photo. Her mother standing in the kitchen, smiling stiffly. Her father seated, tired eyes half closed, and between them stood her younger sister, Brianna, glowing in a cream dress. Next to Brianna was Cole Donovan, Evelyn's Cole, the man who had shared her bed for 6 years, the man who had promised marriage once things stabilized. The caption read, "Small dinner tonight, family only." Evelyn stared at her phone until the screen dimmed. She didn't cry, not yet. Her hands were too numb for that. Her apartment was silent except for the low hum of traffic outside her window in Manhattan. A half-empty Starbucks cup sat cold on the table beside her laptop. She had been working late again, trying to catch up after losing a project she'd quietly built from scratch. A project that, coincidentally, Cole had taken credit for before leaving. Her phone buzzed again, a private message this time, from Cole. "I didn't plan for you to find out like this." That sentence was worse than the photo. 6 months earlier, Evelyn had been sleeping on a hospital chair while her father recovered from a stroke. Cole had stopped visiting after the second week. He said hospitals made him anxious. He said he needed to focus on work. He said she understood. She always understood. Now her sister was wearing the necklace Evelyn had once picked out for herself but never bought because they needed to save money. Now her parents were smiling for the man who had walked away the moment Evelyn became inconvenient. Evelyn typed, deleted, typed again. Then she locked her phone and set it face down. An hour later, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror. She looked thinner, older, not broken, just erased, like someone who had slowly been written out of her own life. Her email inbox chimed. Another rejection. Another "we've decided to move forward with a different direction." She closed the laptop. Enough. That night, as rain streaked down the glass walls of her building, a black car idled at the curb below. She noticed it only because it hadn't moved in 10 minutes. The driver remained unseen. The windows were dark. Evelyn didn't know that inside that car sat a man who already knew her name. She didn't know her sister's promotion was already being reviewed by lawyers. She didn't know Cole's company had been marked for acquisition weeks ago. All she knew was this. She'd been discarded by the people she sacrificed the most for, and she had no idea that walking out of her old life was about to place her directly in the path of the most dangerous man she would ever meet, a man who would change the rules for her and then make everyone else pay. Because the next time Evelyn Hart would see her sister and her ex, she wouldn't be standing alone. Evelyn didn't hear from her sister directly, not at first. Brianna had never been good with confrontation. She preferred distance, silence, and carefully chosen moments where Evelyn was already too tired to fight back. 3 days after the photo, their mother called. "You should come by," she said carefully. "Your sister wants to talk. Wants, not needs. Not owes you an explanation. Wants." Evelyn almost said no. She should have said no. But old habits are hard to kill, especially when you've spent your life being the one who keeps the peace. So that Sunday afternoon, she took the subway uptown, her reflection flickering in the dark window as the train rattled north. Her parents' apartment smelled the same, lemon cleaner, old books, familiar comfort that no longer felt safe. Brianna was already there, sitting at the dining table, calm, perfectly styled, wearing a soft blue sweater that made her look harmless. Cole was not there. That was intentional. "I didn't plan for this either," Brianna began, folding her hands. Feelings just happened. Evelyn stood. She didn't sit. Her legs felt steadier that way. "You knew," Evelyn said quietly. "You knew how long we were together." Brianna nodded, eyes glossy but dry. "I did. But you were always busy, always tired, always stressed. Cole needed someone who could support him. Support him." Evelyn felt something crack in her chest, not loudly, but deeply, like a fault line giving way. "I was supporting Dad," she said. "I was paying hospital bills. I was covering rent when you were still asking Mom for money." Brianna flinched just slightly. "That's not fair," she said. "You chose that." There it was, the sentence that erased everything Evelyn had sacrificed. Their mother cleared her throat. "Brianna didn't mean it like that, but she did, and Evelyn knew it." Brianna leaned forward. "You're strong. You'll be okay. You always land on your feet. I never do." That was the lie Brianna had told herself for years, that Evelyn's resilience meant she didn't feel pain, that taking from her was justified because Evelyn could survive it. Evelyn realized then that this wasn't about Cole. It never had been. It was about winning, about finally being chosen. "I hope it was worth it," Evelyn said, her voice steady. Brianna exhaled in relief, mistaking calm for forgiveness. "It is," she said softly. Evelyn nodded once. Then she turned toward the door. She didn't see the smile fade from Brianna's face when she left. She didn't hear her mother whisper, "Did we do the right thing?" And she didn't know that this conversation would be repeated soon, very publicly, when Brianna would realize that taking everything from her sister came with a price she never imagined, because the next time they spoke, Evelyn wouldn't be asking for understanding. That night, Evelyn didn't go home right away. She walked, no destination, no music in her ears, just the sound of her boots against wet pavement as Manhattan moved around her like she didn't exist. Neon lights reflected in puddles. Cars rushed past, full of people going somewhere they still belonged. She stopped at a small bookstore near the corner and stood inside longer than necessary, pretending to browse. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She didn't check it. She already knew who it would be. By the time she reached her apartment, it was past midnight. She kicked off her shoes, dropped her bag, and sat on the floor with her back against the couch. The silence was loud, too loud. For the first time since everything collapsed, she cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent tears sliding down her face as she pressed her fist against her mouth to keep from making a sound. She cried for the years she gave away, for the version of herself who thought loyalty guaranteed safety, for the way her own family had looked at her like she was the problem for not being happy enough about losing everything. The next morning, reality didn't pause for grief. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from her mother, 2 texts from Cole, 1 email from work reminding her that her contract was ending earlier than expected. Budget restructuring, it said. No apology. Evelyn made coffee she barely tasted and opened her laptop. She updated her resume. Again. Sent applications. Again. Each rejection felt lighter than the last, not because it hurt less, but because she expected it now. By evening, she sat by the window with a cheap takeout container, watching the city darken. Down on the street, a black sedan pulled up and stopped. She noticed it because it didn't double park or honk. It just waited. Minutes passed. The car stayed. Evelyn frowned, unease curling in her stomach. She told herself she was imagining things. That grief made people paranoid. Across the street, inside the car, a man studied the building through rain-speckled glass. He didn't check his phone, didn't speak. He already had all the information he needed. Evelyn Hart, age 30, no criminal record, no scandals. Just a woman recently pushed out of her own life. "She's tougher than they think," he said quietly to the driver. "Does she know?" the driver asked. "No," the man replied, "and for now, that's better." Upstairs, Evelyn closed her curtains, unaware that her quiet unraveling had caught the attention of someone who dealt in consequences, not comfort. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, repeating the same thought over and over. Survive first. Feel later. She didn't know that silence was no longer her shield. She didn't know she had already stepped onto someone else's board. And she didn't know that the man watching her had just decided she was worth breaking rules for. Evelyn met him on a night when she had nothing left to lose. The rain came down harder than the forecast promised, soaking the sidewalk and turning the streetlights into blurred halos. She had stayed late at a small corner cafe, nursing one drink she couldn't really afford, just to avoid going back to an apartment that felt too empty. When she finally stepped outside, the cold hit her first, then the silence. The street was quieter than usual. Too quiet. She pulled her coat tighter and started walking, heels clicking softly against the pavement. Halfway down the block, a black sedan rolled forward and stopped beside her. Not fast, not aggressive, just enough to make her slow. The window lowered. "Ms. Hart," a man's voice said calmly. Evelyn froze. She turned toward the car, heart pounding. Inside sat a man in his early 40s, dark hair streaked slightly with gray, posture relaxed but alert. His eyes were sharp, unreadable, not curious, assessing. "You have the wrong person," she said automatically. "No," he replied, "I don't." Her hand tightened around her bag. "How do you know my name?" "Because you've been very busy surviving," he said, "and very unlucky with the people closest to you." That sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the rain. "I don't talk to strangers," Evelyn said. He nodded once, as if he respected that. "Good, neither do I. That's why I'm offering something simple." She waited. "A ride," he said, "and a conversation you can walk away from if you choose." Evelyn hesitated. Every instinct told her this was dangerous. Every rational thought told her to step back. But exhaustion does strange things to judgment. So does betrayal. She opened the door. Inside, the car smelled faintly of leather and rain. The door closed softly, sealing her inside a world that felt heavier, quieter. "My name is Alexander Russo," he said as the car pulled away. "I'm not here to save you." "That's comforting," Evelyn muttered. A corner of his mouth lifted. "I'm here because your sister and your ex made a move they don't understand yet." Her breath caught. What move? He didn't answer right away. He watched the road, hands steady. "Tonight," he said finally, "I want you to listen. Tomorrow you decide whether you disappear quietly or walk back into their world with me beside you." Evelyn swallowed. "Why me?" He turned to her then, gaze intense. "Because you're the only one in this mess who hasn't lied." The car slowed at a red light. The city reflected in the glass around them. Evelyn realized she was already holding her breath. Because somewhere between that silence and his words, she understood one thing clearly. This man didn't offer help unless there was a price. The car didn't take Evelyn home. It crossed the river instead, lights blurring past the windows as Manhattan slipped behind them. She noticed the change immediately. Different streets, quieter blocks, fewer pedestrians. The kind of places where people didn't linger unless they belonged. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere private," Alexander Russo replied. "You're free to leave when we arrive." That didn't calm her. But it did tell her something important. He wasn't pretending this was safe. He wasn't pretending to be nice. The car stopped in front of a low, modern building with dark glass and no visible sign. A doorman nodded once and stepped aside without asking questions. Inside, the elevator rose in silence. The space they entered felt lived in, not flashy. Clean lines, soft lighting, a single bookshelf against the wall. Evelyn noticed the titles without meaning to. Strategy, history, power, control. Alexander poured water into 2 glasses and handed her one. "Drink," he said. "You'll need clarity." She did. Her throat was dry. "You said my sister and my ex made a move," Evelyn said. "What does that have to do with you?" Alexander leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Cole's company is being positioned for acquisition, quietly, aggressively." Evelyn stiffened. "He never mentioned that." "He wouldn't," Alexander said. "He doesn't know who's buying." "And Brianna?" Alexander's eyes sharpened. "Your sister is attached to a public relations contract tied to that same acquisition. It's designed to fail. When it does, blame will be useful." Evelyn set the glass down slowly. You're saying they're being set up. I'm saying they walked into something bigger than their ambition, he replied, and you're standing in the middle of it without realizing. Her pulse raced. So why tell me? Alexander met her gaze. Because I need someone they underestimate. She laughed softly, bitter. That would be me. Yes, he said, exactly. Evelyn stepped back. I don't want revenge. I didn't say revenge, Alexander replied. I said leverage. Silence stretched between them. What do you want from me? She asked. Visibility, he said. When the time comes, I want you seen. With me. Calm. Unbroken. And in return? Alexander didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was lower. In return, you get the truth. Protection. And the chance to stop being the person everyone sacrifices without consequence. Evelyn searched his face. And the cost? His expression didn't soften. Once you step in, he said, you don't get to pretend you didn't know who I was. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. She understood then. This wasn't rescue. This was alignment. And somehow that felt more honest than anything she'd been offered before, because saying yes wouldn't make her safe, but it would make her impossible to ignore. Evelyn didn't sleep that night. She lay on her bed fully dressed, staring at the ceiling while Alexander Russo's words replayed in her head. Visibility, leverage, alignment. None of it sounded like safety. All of it sounded deliberate. By morning, her phone was full. Missed calls from her mother. A message from Brianna that read, "We should really talk like adults." Another from Cole, shorter, sharper. "You don't have to make this difficult." That one made her laugh. Quietly, bitterly. She showered, dressed, and went to a job interview she already knew she wouldn't get. The office was polished, the smiles rehearsed. When they asked about her last role, she answered honestly. She always had. She left with the familiar ache of being overlooked. In the afternoon, Alexander's assistant sent a single message. Dinner, 8. Optional. Optional. That was new. Evelyn almost didn't go. She told herself she could walk away now, that she didn't owe anyone anything. But something inside her resisted the idea of disappearing quietly again. She was tired of surviving in silence. At 8 sharp, she stepped into the restaurant. Alexander was already there. No greeting, no charm, just a nod toward the seat across from him. "I need to be clear," Evelyn said before sitting. "I know you're using me." Alexander didn't deny it. "Yes, and I know this could blow back on me, yes." She held his gaze. "Then why should I stay?" He studied her for a long moment. "Because walking away won't undo what they've already done to you. It just lets them do it again, later." That landed harder than she expected. "You won't protect me if this goes wrong," she said. "No," he replied, "but I'll make sure the truth lands where it should." Evelyn exhaled slowly. "I don't want to hurt them." "You won't," Alexander said. "They'll hurt themselves. You'll just be present when it happens." The waiter arrived. Evelyn barely touched her food. "So what am I to you?" she asked quietly. "A symbol?" "For now," Alexander said. "Yes." She nodded. "Then I choose the terms." He raised an eyebrow. "I don't lie," she said. "I don't manipulate. And if I walk away at the end of this, you let me." A pause. Then, "Agreed," he said. Evelyn realized something then. This wasn't about revenge. It was about refusing to disappear. She stood steady. "Tell me what comes next." Alexander's expression shifted just slightly. Next, he said, "They see you again." And for the first time since everything fell apart, Evelyn didn't feel small. Because staying wasn't weakness anymore. It was a choice. Evelyn told herself she would leave after the first public appearance. That was the lie she used to fall asleep at night. The plan was simple on the surface. Appear once. Be seen. Let rumors start their quiet work, then disappear before the fallout reached her. That was what a sensible person would do. But sense had never protected her before. The first invitation arrived 3 days later, a charity reception hosted by people whose names appeared regularly in business headlines. Evelyn recognized some of them from articles Cole used to read aloud, pretending proximity meant relevance. Her name was listed as Alexander Russo's guest. She stared at the email for a long time before closing her laptop. That evening, she stood in her apartment holding a dress she hadn't worn in years. It was simple, dark, unremarkable. She almost put it back, almost chose invisibility again. Instead, she dressed carefully, not to impress, to feel solid. The car ride was quiet. Alexander didn't speak much. He never filled space unless it served a purpose. When they arrived, the room shifted the moment they entered, not dramatically, subtly. People noticed him first. Then they noticed her. That was when she understood. No one was looking at her with pity. No one looked through her. They looked curious, calculating, as if she were a question they hadn't prepared for. Halfway through the evening, Evelyn excused herself to the restroom and locked the door behind her. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline. She could still leave. She could slip out, call a cab, go back to being invisible before anyone connected dots. The thought hovered there, tempting. Then her phone buzzed. A message from Brianna. "Are you with him?" No greeting, no concern, just panic. Evelyn stared at the screen. For the first time, she didn't feel the urge to explain herself. She didn't owe clarity to people who never offered it. When she returned to the room, Alexander glanced at her. "You don't have to stay." "I know," she said. He studied her. "You're choosing this." Yes. Not because she trusted him, not because she believed the outcome would be kind. She stayed because she was tired of leaving spaces where she deserved to stand, because walking away had never stopped. The damage, it had only made it quieter. As the night unfolded, Evelyn realized something else. Alexander might be using her presence, but for the first time, her presence had weight, and she wasn't ready to give that up. Because staying meant she was no longer running from what hurt her. She was walking straight through it. The next time Evelyn saw her sister, it wasn't by accident. The invitation arrived, folded inside thick cream paper delivered by courier. A private engagement celebration. Brianna and Cole, rooftop venue, Manhattan skyline. Dress code formal. Evelyn stared at the card for a long time, pulse steady in a way that surprised her. A few weeks ago, this would have destroyed her. Now it felt like confirmation. The stage was being built, and they were inviting her to watch from the audience. Alexander read the card once and handed it back. "They want control of the narrative," he said. "They think you're irrelevant now." "That's why they invited me," Evelyn replied, "to prove it." He nodded. "Yes, and because Brianna is nervous." That word stayed with her. Nervous. The night of the party, Evelyn stood in front of the mirror longer than usual, not to perfect herself, but to center herself. She chose a dress that didn't demand attention, clean lines, confident fit, no armor, no disguise. When Alexander's car pulled up, the city lights reflected across the glass like something cinematic. She noticed the way people looked as they arrived, how conversations paused, how eyes followed them. On the rooftop, music played softly. Laughter floated through warm air. Brianna stood near the center, radiant, one hand resting possessively on Cole's arm. She looked perfect. Too perfect. Then she saw Evelyn. The smile on Brianna's face didn't disappear, but it tightened. Her grip on Cole shifted. He followed her gaze and froze for half a second too long. Evelyn met his eyes without flinching. Introductions rippled outward. Whispers followed. Alexander spoke little, but his presence carried weight. People leaned in. People remembered names. At one point, Brianna approached, champagne in hand. "You came," she said brightly. "Yes," Evelyn replied. "You invited me." An awkward beat. Cole cleared his throat. "You look well." Evelyn smiled politely. "So do you." It wasn't sharp. That was the problem. Calm unsettled them more than anger ever could. As the night went on, Evelyn noticed small things. the way Cole kept checking his phone, the way Brianna scanned the room like she was counting exits, the way conversations shifted when Alexander joined them. This wasn't a celebration, it was a test. And without saying a word, Evelyn passed it. Near the edge of the rooftop, Alexander leaned in slightly. "They're already off balance," he said quietly. Evelyn exhaled. Good. She didn't know the trap had already been triggered. She didn't know contracts were being reviewed in real time. She didn't know tonight would be the last time Brianna felt in control. She only knew one thing. Walking back into their world hadn't broken her. It had exposed them. The shift didn't happen loudly. That was the dangerous part. Evelyn noticed it in fragments. A pause when she and Alexander passed a group near the bar. A conversation that stopped mid-sentence and restarted in a different tone. A woman she didn't know asking, "Who is she?" And someone else answering, "You don't know?" Cole felt it too. His smile stayed fixed, but his eyes kept moving. He checked his phone again, then again, thumb hovering as if he were waiting for permission to panic. Brianna sensed it last. She laughed too loudly, leaning into people who had already begun to lean away. Her engagement ring caught the light, but no one commented on it anymore. Attention had shifted, and she couldn't pull it back. Evelyn stood near the edge of the rooftop, watching it unfold. This was the part Alexander had warned her about. The moment when stories start forming before facts are confirmed, when power moves invisibly. A man Evelyn recognized from a business magazine approached Alexander, voice low. They spoke briefly. Alexander nodded once. That was all. Cole's phone buzzed. He stepped away, face tightening as he read. When he looked up, his eyes found Evelyn immediately. Not anger, fear. He crossed the rooftop quickly, stopping just short of her. "What's going on?" he asked under his breath. Evelyn met his gaze. "You should probably ask your bosses." His jaw clenched. "Did you do something?" She shook her head. "I didn't have to." Across the space, Brianna watched them, suspicion blooming into something sharper. She approached, smile already strained. "What are you two talking about?" she asked. Cole didn't answer. Alexander stepped closer, voice calm. "You might want to enjoy the rest of your evening," he said to Brianna. "It's moving faster than you think." Her face paled. "What does that mean?" "It means," Alexander replied, "that deals don't fail loudly. They fail quietly. And then people look for someone to blame." Brianna laughed nervously. "This is ridiculous." But her hands were shaking. Evelyn felt it then. Not triumph, not revenge, relief. The quiet kind that comes when the truth starts breathing on its own. Phones buzzed across the rooftop, one after another. Conversations broke apart. People began leaving early, excuses thin. Cole stared at his screen, color draining from his face. "This isn't over," he said to Evelyn, voice low. She tilted her head. "It already is." He didn't answer. He couldn't. Evelyn turned away, heart steady as the engagement party collapsed without a single raised voice, because the truth had finally entered the room and it didn't need her permission to stay. The fallout didn't come with shouting or headlines. It arrived quietly, the way real damage always does. By Monday morning, Cole was no longer returning calls. Not because he didn't want to, but because no one was calling anymore. The office he'd walked into so confidently for years felt different. People avoided eye contact. Meetings were postponed. A calendar invite titled Strategic Review sat unanswered on his screen like a warning. He finally cornered his manager near the elevators. "What's happening?" Cole asked, forcing a laugh. "Everyone's acting strange." The man hesitated. "You didn't hear?" "Hear what? There's been a change. Acquisition talks stalled. Compliance flagged several irregularities. They're reassessing personnel." Cole's stomach dropped. "Reassessing me?" No answer. Just a look that said enough. Across town, Brianna refreshed her email for the 10th time that hour. A brand partnership she'd announced publicly the week before had gone silent. Then another. Then a polite message arrived from her PR firm requesting an urgent call. She didn't make it through the first 5 minutes. "They're stepping back," the representative said carefully. "There are concerns about optics." "Optics?" Brianna snapped. "About what?" "About alignment," the woman replied, "and about who you're associated with." Brianna hung up and stared at her reflection. For the first time, she didn't recognize the woman looking back. That evening, Cole showed up at Evelyn's building unannounced. He looked smaller somehow, less certain. She didn't invite him in. "Did you plan this?" he asked, voice tight. Evelyn leaned against the doorframe. "You planned your choices. This is just what followed. You brought him into this," Cole said. "You knew what he'd do." "I knew who you were," she replied. That was enough. He ran a hand through his hair. "We can fix this, you and me. We always land on our feet." Evelyn studied him. The man who once felt like home now felt like a stranger repeating lines that no longer worked. "No," she said gently. "You land on people. I just stopped being there." Behind her, the elevator chimed softly. Life moving forward. Cole opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. For the first time, he understood. This wasn't revenge. This was consequence. And Evelyn closed the door without another word, because some realizations arrived too late to matter, and this was one of them. The real break happened in a room Evelyn wasn't supposed to matter in. It was a glass-walled conference space overlooking the city, the kind designed to impress investors and intimidate anyone without leverage. Evelyn sat quietly at the far end of the table, hands folded, posture relaxed. She wasn't on the agenda. That was the point. Cole sat 3 seats down, jaw tight, suit immaculate, but worn like armor. He hadn't slept. It showed in the way he kept rubbing his thumb along the edge of his phone, waiting for it to save him. Alexander entered last. No announcement, no pause. Conversation stopped anyway. The board chair cleared his throat. "We'll begin with the acquisition update." Slides appeared on the screen. Numbers, charts, neutral language that hid sharp decisions. Evelyn followed easily. This was familiar territory. What wasn't familiar was the way Cole's name appeared, then disappeared, from a column labeled Continuity. "Based on compliance findings," the chair continued, "we're restructuring leadership exposure during the transition." Cole leaned forward. "That wasn't discussed." "It was," the chair replied calmly, "just not with you." A ripple moved through the room, small, controlled. Alexander said nothing. Evelyn watched Cole's face as understanding arrived in stages. First confusion, then denial, then the look people get when they realize they were never in control to begin with. "So what happens to my role?" Cole asked. Another pause. Deliberate. "You'll be offered a short-term consulting exit," the chair said, effective immediately. The word immediate landed like a verdict. Cole turned, eyes searching, and found Evelyn. For a moment, he looked almost pleading, like if she spoke, this could be reversed. She didn't. Alexander finally leaned forward. "This isn't personal," he said evenly. "It's alignment." Cole's voice cracked. "You knew about this?" "Yes. And you brought her here to watch?" Cole snapped. Alexander glanced at Evelyn, then back. "No. I brought her because she understands consequences." No one contradicted him. The meeting ended 10 minutes later. Efficient, ruthless, quiet. In the hallway, people avoided Cole, not out of cruelty, out of instinct. Falling power repels. Evelyn stood as well, heart steady. She hadn't spoken. She hadn't needed to. As they walked toward the elevator, Alexander spoke softly. "That was the first crack," she nodded. "I felt it." "This is where most people break," he said. Evelyn looked straight ahead. "I already broke once. I'm not doing it again." The elevator doors closed. Behind them, Cole stood alone in a room that no longer needed him. Because power didn't leave him loudly, it simply moved on, without asking permission. Brianna lost control the moment the calls stopped coming. At first, she told herself it was timing. Brands were slow. People were busy. Engagement announcements distracted audiences. She refreshed her inbox anyway, again and again, fingers tapping the screen like persistence might force a response. By noon, the silence felt intentional. Her phone rang once. Her PR manager. Brianna answered on the first ring, relief already forming. "We need to talk," the woman said, voice clipped. "Now." The call lasted 7 minutes. It felt longer. By the time it ended, Brianna's engagement ring lay on the counter beside her, forgotten. 2 contracts paused, 1 terminated, another under review. Words that sounded polite but meant the same thing: distance. She drove to her parents' apartment without thinking, keys shaking in her hand. Her mother opened the door, startled by the look on her face. "What happened?" she asked. Brianna stepped inside and finally let it spill. The pressure, the deals, the way people were suddenly cautious when they said her name. She talked fast, words overlapping, panic sharp around the edges. Her father listened quietly. Then he asked one question. "What did you do to your sister?" Brianna froze. "That's not fair," she said. "This isn't about Evelyn." Her mother hesitated. "Brianna people called today. They asked why your sister was treated the way she was. They asked why she was pushed out." The room felt smaller. Brianna laughed, high and brittle. "She's fine. She's always fine." "No," her father said gently. "She was carrying us, and we let you take more." Something in his tone broke through the noise. For the first time, Brianna saw it clearly, the pattern she'd denied, the way she'd justified every choice by telling herself Evelyn was stronger, that Evelyn could handle it. "I didn't think it would go this far," Brianna whispered. "That's the problem," her mother said softly. "You didn't think about her at all." That afternoon, Brianna tried calling Evelyn, once, twice, 5 times. No answer. She sent a message she deleted before sending. Then another she did send. "I didn't mean to hurt you." Evelyn read it hours later. She didn't respond, not because she was cruel, but because Brianna was finally feeling the weight Evelyn had carried alone. And that was something no apology could erase. Because when the mask fell, Brianna wasn't exposed by revenge. She was exposed by truth. The offer came quietly, the way dangerous things often do. Alexander didn't frame it as temptation. He never did. He laid it out like a fact, like weather moving in. They were sitting in his office, the city stretched out below the windows, glass and steel catching late afternoon light. "This ends cleanly if you stay visible," he said. "If you don't, it still ends, but not in your favor." Evelyn absorbed the words without reacting. She'd learned how to listen without giving herself away. "What does staying visible mean?" she asked. Alexander turned slightly, meeting her gaze. "A title, a role. You sit in rooms where decisions are made. You let people assume what they want." "And the truth?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. "The truth complicates things," he said finally. "It always does." Evelyn stood and walked closer to the window. Below them, traffic pulsed like blood through veins. All of it looked powerful from this height. All of it looked distant. "If I take this," she said, "people will say I climbed here because of you." "Yes." "They'll say I traded silence for safety." "Yes." She turned back to him. "And if I don't?" Alexander's expression didn't change. "Then you walk away with less protection, more uncertainty." There it was. The real choice. Not between good and evil, but between comfort and clarity. Evelyn thought of her sister's message, of Cole at her door bargaining with familiarity, of every time she had chosen quiet to keep the peace. "I won't lie," she said. Alexander watched her closely. "I won't pretend this didn't cost me something," she continued, "and I won't let people believe I'm here because I was rescued." Silence stretched. Then Alexander nodded once. "That makes it harder." "I know," and slower. "I'm patient," she said. He studied her for a long moment. Something like respect surfaced there, unguarded. "Very well," he said. "We do it your way." Evelyn exhaled, tension releasing from her shoulders. She hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding herself together. As she left the office, her phone buzzed. A message from an unfamiliar number, an invitation to speak at a small industry forum. No leverage attached, no conditions, just a chance to be heard. Evelyn smiled faintly. She didn't need power handed to her in exchange for silence. She chose truth knowing it would cost more and knowing it would finally belong to her. Alexander had built his life on rules, not the kind written down or spoken aloud, but the kind that kept him alive and in control. Never mix business with emotion. Never offer more than necessary. Never make promises that could be used against you. Evelyn disrupted every one of them without trying. The first sign came a week after the forum. Evelyn's words measured, honest, unpolished, circulated quietly through rooms she had never been invited into before. Not viral, not loud, but remembered. People began asking for her opinion instead of Alexander's confirmation. That unsettled him more than resistance ever had. They stood together at a private dinner one evening, overlooking the city. No press, no audience, just a handful of people who mattered. Evelyn spoke easily, not performing, not deferring. When she excused herself, the conversation followed her absence instead of his presence. "You didn't tell me she was that sharp," one man said lightly. Alexander didn't answer. Later, alone in the car, Evelyn noticed the tension in him. "Did I cross a line?" she asked. "No," he said. Then, after a pause, "You moved it." That night, he told her something he hadn't told anyone else. "I don't make exceptions," he said quietly. "People either fit the structure or they don't stay." Evelyn didn't respond. She'd learned not to fill silence with reassurance. "You could have taken the easier path," he continued. "Visibility without resistance, safety without friction, and you would have respected me less," she said. He glanced at her. Yes. The admission hung between them. Days later, the offer changed. Not a favor, not protection. A partnership on paper. Authority that didn't disappear if he did. Terms negotiated, not gifted. "You don't need to say yes," Alexander said. "I know," Evelyn replied. She signed anyway, not because she needed him, because this time, the power didn't come with erasure. It was after, standing on the balcony, city wind brushing past them, that he spoke again. "I don't do this," he said. "Do what?" she asked. "Build something that can exist without me." Evelyn looked out at the lights. "Then maybe it's time you did." Alexander realized then what had changed. For the first time in decades, he wasn't offering control. He was offering permanence. And he didn't know if that terrified him more or if losing her would, because breaking his rules was dangerous, but letting her walk away would have been worse. Evelyn learned something unexpected as everything unraveled. Revenge wasn't loud. There were no confrontations, no dramatic speeches, no moments where she raised her voice or demanded anything back. The damage happened in silence, carried out by systems that no longer bent to familiarity or excuses. Cole felt it first. His consulting exit became permanent, faster than anyone predicted. One firm declined quietly, then another. Then a third stopped responding altogether. His resume, once impressive, now carried invisible marks. Gaps that raised questions. References that hesitated. Doors didn't slam. They simply didn't open. He started dressing more carefully, arriving early to interviews that never led anywhere. Confidence drained from him in small increments. He still talked like someone important. People just stopped believing him. Brianna's fall was messier. Influencer friends stopped tagging her. Invitations dried up. A photo shoot was postponed, then canceled. When she asked why, the answer was always the same. Brand realignment. The phrase followed her everywhere. It sounded harmless. It wasn't. She tried to reclaim control the only way she knew how, by rewriting the story. She hinted at misunderstandings, at jealousy, at being targeted. But the narrative didn't stick. Too many people had already noticed who thrived quietly and who collapsed when attention shifted away. Evelyn watched it all from a distance. She didn't block anyone. She didn't gloat. She didn't explain herself. She focused on work, on learning rooms she'd never been allowed into before, on building something that didn't depend on who stood beside her. One afternoon, Alexander asked her if she wanted to attend a private meeting where decisions would finalize. "You don't have to see it," he said. "It's done either way." Evelyn shook her head. "I don't need to." He studied her. "You're sure?" "Yes," she said. "I don't need proof anymore." That was when he understood. This wasn't vengeance fueled by anger. It was consequence allowed to finish its work. Later that week, Cole sent one last message. "I hope you're happy." Evelyn read it once and deleted it. Happiness wasn't the point. Peace was. She stood at her window that night, city lights steady below. No rush, no fear, no urge to look back. Because the most painful punishment for those who betrayed her wasn't what she did. It was what she refused to do anymore. She refused to shrink. She refused to rescue them. And she refused to disappear. And that silence hurt more than anything she could have said. When the noise finally stopped, Evelyn didn't feel relief right away. She felt tired. Not the kind of exhaustion that sleep fixes, but the deeper kind. The aftermath of holding yourself together for too long. The kind that settles in your bones once the danger passes and your body realizes it's allowed to slow down. For the first time in months, her calendar had space. No emergency meetings, no last-minute calls, no emotional cleanups that weren't hers to manage. She took the morning slowly, drinking coffee by the window, watching the city wake up without needing her attention. Some days, she walked through Central Park alone, phone on silent, steps unhurried. She listened to the sound of leaves underfoot, to the low rhythm of life continuing without demanding anything from her. It felt unfamiliar, almost suspicious. Healing, she learned, was quiet. It wasn't dramatic forgiveness or sudden clarity. It was noticing she no longer flinched when her phone buzzed. It was realizing she could think about her sister without anger tightening her chest. It was the strange calm that came from knowing she would never go back, even if asked. Alexander gave her space, more than she expected. He didn't check in constantly, didn't hover. He respected silence the way some people respect contracts. When they did meet, it was unforced. Two people who had survived something together, now choosing what came next without pressure. One evening, they sat across from each other in a quiet restaurant, neither of them in a rush. "You're different," he said finally. Evelyn smiled faintly. "So are you." He considered that. "I don't usually let things end without control." "And now?" she asked. "Now," he said, "I'm learning that control isn't the same as peace." She appreciated that he didn't dress it up as wisdom. It sounded like effort, like practice. Later, alone again, Evelyn opened a notebook she hadn't touched in years. She wrote without structure, without purpose, just thoughts, half-formed hopes, boundaries she hadn't known how to name before. She didn't write about revenge. She didn't write about loss. She wrote about what she wanted to protect, her time, her dignity, her voice. Healing wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about returning to the person she'd been before survival became her full-time job. And for the first time, that felt possible. Because after the fire, Evelyn wasn't rebuilding what burned. She was choosing what deserved to exist next. Alexander didn't plan the moment. That was what made it dangerous. They were in his apartment late. The city stretched below the windows in a familiar wash of light. No meetings, no agendas, just the quiet that had settled between them after weeks of choosing calm over chaos. Evelyn stood near the window, barefoot, holding a glass she hadn't finished. She was relaxed in a way she hadn't been in years. That mattered more to him than he wanted to admit. "You could leave," he said suddenly. She turned, surprised. "Is that what you want?" "No," he answered honestly. "But I need to know you're here because you choose to be, not because this life pulled you in." Evelyn studied him. This wasn't the man who once spoke in leverage and outcomes. This was someone exposing a fault line. "I already chose," she said. "I stayed after everything ended." "That's not the same," he replied. This would change the shape of things. He reached into the drawer beside him and set a small box on the counter. He didn't push it toward her, didn't open it. Silence filled the room. Evelyn felt her chest tighten, not with excitement, but with clarity. "You don't do this," she said quietly. "No," he agreed. "I don't." "Why now?" Alexander didn't look away. "Because for the first time, no, I'm not afraid of losing control. I'm afraid of losing you." That honesty landed harder than any rehearsed speech. Evelyn walked closer, but didn't touch the box. "If I say yes," she said, "it won't be for protection, or power, or stability, I know. And if I say no," his jaw tightened slightly, "then I'll still respect the choice." She believed him. That was the problem. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, breathing through the weight of it. She thought of who she'd been when love felt like debt, when commitment meant shrinking. "I need one thing," she said finally. "Name it." "I don't disappear into your world," she said. "We build something that can hold both of us." Alexander nodded once. Agreed. She picked up the box then, not trembling, not rushing. "Yes," she said, "but not because I need saving." He exhaled, something unguarded breaking through his composure. "I wouldn't insult you by thinking that," he said. Evelyn smiled, soft and real, because this time, love wasn't a rescue. It was a meeting of two people who had already survived on their own. The engagement didn't change Evelyn's life overnight. That surprised people. There were no glossy announcements, no sudden shift in how she dressed or spoke, no performance of happiness meant to reassure others. She didn't become softer or louder or more visible than she already was. If anything, she became quieter, more precise. She kept her mornings the same. Coffee by the window, emails answered slowly, deliberately, decisions made without urgency. When people congratulated her, she thanked them and moved on. She didn't owe anyone an explanation of what the ring meant or didn't mean. What changed was how she occupied space. At work, she no longer waited to be invited into conversations. She spoke when it mattered and stayed silent when it didn't. People listened, not because of Alexander's name, but because she didn't fill her words with apology anymore. One afternoon, she walked into a meeting she once would have avoided. The room was full of people who had underestimated her months ago. She felt no satisfaction in proving them wrong, just calm certainty. Afterward, Alexander asked her if it bothered her being seen differently now. "No," she said. "What bothered me was being unseen when I mattered most." They didn't merge lives recklessly. They built routines, boundaries, time apart, time together that didn't feel like negotiation. Evelyn kept her independence intact, not as a condition, but as a truth. She visited her parents once, on her own terms. The conversation was careful, honest, not fully healed, but no longer bleeding. She left without resentment and without guilt. Brianna didn't reach out again. That silence felt final, and Evelyn let it be. One evening, walking home alone, Evelyn passed a familiar cafe. She stopped briefly, watching people inside laugh, work, live. For a moment, she remembered who she'd been when everything felt fragile. Then she kept walking. She wasn't trying to reclaim the past. She was building a future that didn't require her to disappear to keep peace. Later that night, Alexander asked her if she was happy. Evelyn thought about it carefully before answering. "I'm grounded," she said, "and that's better." He nodded, understanding. She hadn't risen from betrayal like a storybook heroine. She hadn't transformed into someone untouchable. She had chosen herself again and again until it became natural. And that choice was the most powerful thing she had ever done. The last encounter happened when Evelyn wasn't looking for it. She was leaving a meeting early, the kind that ended cleanly without tension or aftermath. The lobby was bright, afternoon lights spilling across polished floors. She was thinking about dinner, about nothing important, when she heard her name. Evelyn. She stopped. Cole stood near the entrance, thinner than she remembered, suit no longer tailored quite right. He looked like someone who had rehearsed this moment too many times and still hadn't found the right words. "I won't take long," he said quickly. "I just needed to say something." Evelyn nodded once. She didn't step closer. She didn't step away. "I was wrong," he said. "About you? About everything?" She waited. Silence had become her strength. "I thought success meant choosing what looked good," Cole continued. "I didn't realize I was trading away the only thing that made me real." Evelyn studied him, searching for anger and finding none. Just distance. "I'm not here to fix you," she said calmly, "and I'm not here to forgive you." He swallowed. "I know. I just needed you to hear it." "I did," she replied. Across the lobby, Brianna stood frozen near the elevators, eyes wide. She hadn't meant to run into Evelyn. She hadn't meant to be seen. But the city has a way of arranging meetings when avoidance runs out. "Eve," Brianna whispered. Evelyn turned. For a moment, Brianna looked like the sister she used to be. Uncertain, small, not performing. "I didn't know how to stop," Brianna said, voice breaking. "I thought if I won once, I'd finally feel enough." Evelyn felt something soften, not into reconciliation, but into understanding. "You were always enough," she said quietly. "You just chose to take instead of build." Brianna nodded, tears falling. "I'm sorry." Evelyn believed her, and still, she didn't step forward. "I hope you find your way," Evelyn said, "but it won't be through me." She turned then, walking past them both without bitterness or pride, just certainty. Outside, the city moved as it always had. People hurried, cars passed, life continued. Alexander was waiting by the curb, watching her approach. "Was it closure?" he asked. Evelyn thought for a moment, then smiled. "No," she said. "It was justice." She got into the car, heart light, past finally quiet, because justice didn't require punishment. It required truth, timing, and the courage to walk away. Evelyn's wedding wasn't the kind people expected. There were no magazine spreads, no carefully staged photos meant to prove anything, no long guest list filled with people who once doubted her worth. The ceremony was small, held on a quiet terrace overlooking the city she had survived and rebuilt herself within. The morning of the wedding, Evelyn woke up alone. That mattered to her. She made coffee in silence, stood by the window, and watched the Manhattan skyline stretch into the early light. This city had seen her at her lowest, walking alone at night, carrying grief she didn't know how to name. Now it watched her steady, grounded, unchanged in the ways that mattered most. When Alexander joined her later, there was no rush, no nerves disguised as jokes, just calm. "You don't owe anyone today," he said quietly. Evelyn smiled. "I know. That was the difference." She wasn't stepping into marriage to escape loneliness or secure safety. She was stepping into it with a full sense of self, choosing partnership instead of rescue. The vows were simple. Not promises of forever spoken dramatically, but commitments spoken clearly. Respect, choice, truth, space to grow without erasing one another. When Alexander spoke, there was no dominance in his voice. When Evelyn spoke, there was no hesitation. They met in the middle. Her parents attended, subdued but present. There were no speeches meant to rewrite history, just acceptance, earned too late but acknowledged nonetheless. Brianna was not there. That absence felt appropriate, not cruel. Afterward, as guests filtered out and the city hummed below, Evelyn stood alone for a moment, bouquet resting against her arm. She felt no rush of triumph, no need to look back and measure what had been lost. Everything she needed was already here. Alexander approached her quietly. "Any regrets?" he asked. She considered the question honestly. "No," she said. "I don't regret surviving. I don't regret leaving. And I don't regret becoming someone who won't disappear again." They walked forward together, not into a fantasy, but into a life built deliberately. one where power didn't silence her, where love didn't cost her dignity. Evelyn Hart had once been replaced, overlooked, sacrificed. Now she was chosen, not by status, not by revenge, not even by love alone. She was chosen because she finally chose herself, and that choice gave her everything she had ever deserved. So the story comes to an end here. And if you're still with us right now, truly still here, then something in this journey has touched you in a quiet, personal way. What Evelyn's story reminds us is simple, but not easy. You don't heal by winning arguments. You heal by choosing yourself. Betrayal hurts not because we lose people, but because we lose the version of ourselves that believed loyalty would protect us. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Evelyn didn't control what others did to her, but she controlled who she became after. Another Stoic truth says, "What stands in the way becomes the way." The pain that tried to break her became the path that led her to clarity, dignity, and real love. Not rescue, not revenge, but self-respect. If you're watching this and thinking about your own disappointments, your own quiet sacrifices, let this be your reminder. Healing doesn't require applause. It requires honesty, boundaries, and patience with yourself. And if this story spoke to you, if it mirrored something you've lived or are still living, please like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to the channel. We're here to tell stories that don't just entertain, but help you breathe a little easier afterward. You're not weak for feeling deeply. You're strong for staying.